Welcome everyone to Tuesday's virtual staff room. This is our Techy Tuesday updates. These are the updates from December, but up to, I think the last one I had came in was up to the 7th of January. So it might be that some of the later ones aren't actually quite on your domain yet, but most of these will be by now. So I'll go through each of them in turn. I'm very lucky that I've got some other members of the C-Learning team here, particularly today. They're all welcome, of course, but particularly James, because some of these, there may well be some technical questions. And whilst I can read my slides and I understand each of the words are English, I don't necessarily understand them in that order because they're a little bit too technical for me. So I always have James here to help me in case we get some technical questions on some of the very techy stuff. So these are the December and slightly into January updates. So here's the first one. This was very early in December. This is Education Plus only, so these are enterprise licenses, and your admin person can now control the visibility of people across products. So if you are in chat, for example, and you can see the visibility of other people in the area, and the admin person can go in by OU and say, actually, no, you're not going to make this person visible to other members of the domain, other users in the domain, based on OU. So it's particularly in chat and in Gmail, you get messages about whether they're available, and in Calendar as well. You can see whether they are available and so on and so forth. That option will be removed. I think, as you can do it by OU, I think it's worth thinking, is it a tool that we want? It comes on by default, so chances are by this now it's already on. But it might well be, principal, CEO, or whatever of your organization might not want to share that and might want all requests for appointments to go through their PA, for example. And if that's the case, then you can reduce their visibility so that the request has to come through the channels that they decide. So it just gives you a little bit more control about what visibility in terms of their calendars is seen. That's the first one. And I heard a bleep. Was that a question that popped up? No,
no, it was just Jamie putting about questions in the chat if anybody's got any as we move through.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for that.
Just wondering, just on that last one there, Paul, just, we use chat actively all the time. And it, obviously yourself and Jamie and myself are active at the moment. What's classed as a way? Is that when you've actually not got the device on, or is it? Because I'll often, the only reason I mention this is I'll often see people, possibly like James, it'll say he's away, and I'll send him a message in chat, and then he comes back to me practically straight away. So is there like a window of time where you're not actively using chat that it then classes you as away, or what's sort of the rules on that? Do you know?
Top right hand corner, if you look in your chat, you've got you'll see it says active, and you can change the setting there. So if you've got to be away and focused on something else for a moment, then you can actually decide to say that you're away for 1 or 2 hours or for however long. So you can manually set that away rule there. So that, I think that's what you're referring to in terms of the chat. In terms of office stuff, if someone specifies their working hours, if you make an appointment out of working hours, the calendar event will alert you, as long as this reduced visibility isn't turned on for that particular person, because then you won't be able to see their calendars at all. So you'd have to find another way to find out.
Right. Yeah. Francis, just on that point, just put in the chat. Good question. Logged in on a phone, does that mean that it'll always be active?
I think you can still set your status as active on a mobile app. I think. If I'm honest, I've never actually done it on the mobile app. I've only ever done it on a Chromebox. Here we go. I don't know.
Yeah, Sammy's just confirming.
Thanks,
you can toggle away on that. So another question answered through the virtual staff room.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Thank you. Okay, so I think this is quite a big one for people who like to have files that sit in multiple locations. If you weren't aware, there's a shortcut which is Shift-Z, which allows you to put the same document in multiple locations at the moment. And the process of rationalizing that, so that people and things don't get confused, is that option is going to go away. And the way it will work from now on is it will be the single file will remain. And so if I was the owner of the file, that document will reside in my Google Drive. That won't change at all. But if someone else is shared into that and they move that document into another folder, it will only create a shortcut to that document. It won't create a copy of it, even if you use the Shift Z option. So it will always be a copy of a copy. It won't always be a copy. And the way, I don't know if you've noticed this starting to happen, because it's been here for a little while now, that when you've got shortcuts in places now, you get the little shortcut arrow in the bottom right hand corner of the icon to tell you that it's a shortcut, so you know that it's a shortcut rather than the kind of source document, if you like. So it'll be a single location with multiple shortcuts. It won't affect permissions at all. So if you've got access to share it with edit rights now, that will remain the same. You will start to get notification of this across the top of your drive as a banner, but there's no action for the end user to do. But the admin, which is what we're about today, the admin can make some decisions about what level of action is to take. You can decide that rule, single location, multiple shortcuts, will happen to all documents, or to just the documents in your trusted domains and within your domain, or within just your domain, or for them not to be created, for the shortcuts not to be created. I'm not quite sure why that option would be there. I'm trying to think of a use case when that might well be the case. You know, you want people to be able to manage their documents sensibly themselves, don't you, really? So, but it might be a particular document that's particularly sensitive, might well come under that banner, maybe. But I don't think, you know, I think in terms of end user, the only impact is going to be that they're going to see little arrows in the bottom right hand corner of the icons to indicate it's a shortcut rather than anything else. But for you, you've got to decide how those settings are going to be applied across the domain. Okay, so I'll sit on this one for a little while in case you need to take that that link, and I'll copy the link, copy link address into the chat as well, so you've got it. This is an upgrade to the way you can manage kind of the clever things you can do with Google Forms. So they're releasing APIs. It's an open beta. That means that anyone can apply to join it. You've just got to join the early adopter program for Google Forms, and it just means that there's that many more commands that you can apply to it, and that you can also interrogate some more of the metadata and things. So it just gives you a bit more control and a bit more functionality about what you can do with it. I haven't looked at this. I'm not a coder, so I don't know what the kind of list of functions are. But if you are looking at forms and make great use of them, then go and have a look at what that API can do, and see if it can't allow you to kind of customize your forms even more and make their kind of use and you know, consequent actions even more efficient for you and your organization. I think that's the thing there. So you can scan the QR code on your phone to get a link to the early adopter form, but I've also put that link in the chat should you need it for the form to fill out. You've just got to join the early adopter program. Okay, I think this one, again, this is Education Plus only, so it's an enterprise license one. I think this one has got legs, really got legs. So you can basically there's an enhanced way to classify all the documents within your Google Drive through the use of labels. You can allow the end user to apply them, or you can allow just a specified group of people to apply them, or you as an admin person can have a working group to decide what's the best way to apply them. Once you've got that, you can start to write DLP rules that apply labels for you. So you can set labels based on the content of the document, which is really useful. So if you know there's personal information in there or financial information in there, as the document is interrogated within your domain, it will say, well, that fulfills that criteria, therefore I'm going to apply that rule. Therefore, that's the sharing rules that are going to be applied to that. But you can also restrict sharing. So if you've got a document that's got a label that says internal use only, and someone who's in that document tries to share externally, then you can prevent that from happening. So it seems to me a really great set of additional tools and functionality. The only rider with it is it's only as good as the labeling process. So if you're getting inaccurate or incomplete labeling of key documents, then of course the rules simply won't work because they haven't got the labels as the triggers to know what to do. So I think its potential is quite high, but I think there's definitely a training process that needs to go on at your end, particularly if you're going to, even if it's just, I don't know, senior leadership allowed to label with internal use only, for example, you know, or restricted sharing, or whatever the label is that you're going to apply. But I think that that could increase the safety of the data that you are sharing within your organization quite legitimately, and reduce the risk of that being shared out externally, which I think is a really good thing. So I think that is a great little additional piece of classification and functionality. With the adding, yeah, is that a question coming on?
I was just going to ask a question actually, and it might be a stupid question because sometimes I don't get everything from the technical point of view. But with things like drive labels, if you've labeled a document, Theo, hello Theo, he's good. Yeah, and you come Theo. If you've added a drive label to documents, to different documents, can you search for drive labels on like cloud search, for instance? Can you use it as a search term or not? Your labels, just from a, like if you've saved a document as you know, not to be externally shared or something as a drive label, can you search for that using something like cloud search or not?
Bottom line is I don't know yet. I need to wait for it to arrive to be certain, or for me to start to play with it to know for certain. I do know that per document that you've always had the option to add kind of search labels in there's a little in the information panel in Google Drive. If you click on a document and click on information, at the very bottom there's a little a field where you can add, in effect you're adding metadata, and those are being searchable. So I'm assuming the answer is yes, because otherwise what's the use of them? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, it still won't break any sharing permissions. So if you search for internal use only and no internal use only labeled documents have been shared with you, you still won't find them in cloud search.
Sure,
so
yeah.
It won't change. But if they have been shared with you, then you will find them.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so I'm assuming the answer is yes, but I've still got to play with that yet. I don't know if anyone else on the call, whether Sammy's had to play with labels or not yet. I don't even know if they're on our domain yet. I haven't even checked, if I'm honest. So we'll have to wait and see with that one. Maybe I'll do an update next week or something, just once we've seen how it works, because they should be here fairly shortly, I think. But it is only enterprise licenses again. Did I say that? So I think Dave Leonard yesterday from Watergrove Multi-Academy Trust was really excited about this, and he suggested, yes, there's a big training implication because we've got to get this right in order for it to be really useful. But actually, there are things that we definitely don't want to be sharing out externally until we're certain, or ever. So to be able to label them appropriately and set rules to prevent them being shared inappropriately, that's really powerful. So it's a great additional piece of functionality, and let's just see how it plays out. Is the nearest I can give as an answer for the moment. Okay, I'll flip past this very quickly. If you are using Google Meet hardware devices for your video conferencing solution, and you're also using Cisco WebEx as your video conferencing solutions, there's now greater integration between the two. I don't think generally that it's something that happens in schools. Obviously, you tend to go for a single solution, but if you have got those two solutions, you will start to see integration. You'll see clicks and buttons from one to the other to be able to integrate between the two. And of course, at the other end, it'll integrate with Cisco WebEx if it's at the other end of the video conferencing meeting you're about to have. So that's good. I think it's a pretty big standard. I think more so in America than here. But it's there should you be someone who needs that to use that or has used it in the past. Okay, this is one just about an improved user interface for the admin panel, and it's all about the app access control, so you can see much easier what's going on and what's happening to all the various bits. So you can see which ones have been blocked and which ones haven't, which ones are trusted, etc., and so forth, which applications are being used by which users, and the Google services within the organization. So it's just about an improvement to the user interface. I mean, these last 2 years, there's been, the admin panel is almost unrecognizable, isn't it? It's changed so substantially. And a lot of the changes are about just a much better way to view the data, because it was all a bit of a muddle, I think, before. So it's every step it seems to get better, which is a great thing. Okay. This one again is if there are any technical questions, please post them and we'll get James to answer them later. You can now manage your Gmail IMAP controls by group. So if there's a particular group of people that need that particular control, rather than it being by OU, now you can also do it by group within the admin panel, which is great. I mean, the group / OU options, about 2 years old now, I guess, something like that. They've made a quite substantial difference to the way you can manage permissions right across the board, because it gives you much greater granular control. So one of our customers had to share some things externally, and they wanted to do it via a link. I don't need to go into the reasons, but they did. But of course, for the moment, for security, that was turned off. So rather than turning that on for all the staff, they created a group of just that small group of people that needed to share via a link, and they've turned it on, and they'll turn it on for the time that it's needed, and at the end of the project they'll turn it off, and they'll be back to the level of control that they need. So to be able to be that granular with just a very small subset of your users and say, here's the permissions for just that small group of people, that's a really useful thing. So the more that, controlling by group increases across all the tools, the better it will be, I think. So this, I think, is also a really good one. In the past, basically, you specify a language, and that is the language that everybody has. If an individual within your domain, a user within your domain, needs an additional language, they can go in and they can add an additional language. But you weren't able to do it at the admin level before. But from now on, you will be able to do that. So you can manage multiple languages based on the directory. But there is a rider to that, and I know that kind of the detail in the directory is a bit of a movable feast. Yeah, some organizations have got a great deal of detail in there, others not so much detail. So of course, if the detail isn't in there about their specified language and their preferences, then you might not be able to do this. So you need to be certain that you've got relevant information in there should you need it. But you can do it now. You can add multiple languages through the directory API. So another one that is functionality increasing for you to be able to specify marketplace apps by groups rather than by OU, which has been the case in the past. So that process now is much quicker. So if there's a your GCSE music, has got Sibelius or a music app, or it's an ArcGIS app, a GIS app that you want to give you geographers, for example, then you can do that by group now rather than by OU, which again gives you that more granular control. This is an end user one, but it's I put it here because if ever it does happen, I've never heard of this happening to anyone in all the schools that we deal with. Not to say it hasn't, but we've never been told it, not as far as I'm aware. But if a document violates their abuse program policy, the end user of the document, the owner of the document, will get an email saying you've broken the terms of service, and I think the document also gets quarantined. You can then say, well, can you please just review it and just check and explain why you think it was didn't break the rules, and then the Google's own team will make a decision about whether that's the case. Be aware that if the document's in a shared drive, then the managers within the shared drive will get that notification. Okay, so just to be aware of it. I don't think, like I say, I've ever known of it happening to anyone at all. But you might get a once every blue moon a user, saying this has happened, what do I do? And you'll need to just advise them that they just need to request a review. You can see on the little picture there, the button to request a review is there. So chances are they'll probably sort it themselves, but just to be aware that that's now in place, that they're going to get told. Okay, so you've got greater control now about how you restrict membership for groups as well. This is now generally available. You can decide whether the groups can be internal or include external members as well. And you can also decide what type of accounts, whether you can add groups into groups, and whether it's just users or whether it can be service accounts and all that kind of stuff.
Is that you?
Is that a question coming in?
No, I think it's just Theo. He hasn't got his mic off. He's done it now. It's fine. That's
okay,
fine.
excellent.
So we were wondering whether the nested group is new.
I don't know is the answer. I was surprised when it said you couldn't do groups, because I'm sure that you could do groups before.
Yeah, we could do groups, but we didn't know they could have them nested.
No, that's what I thought. I always thought that you could. That's what I'm saying, because I remember when the last setup I did, which was a long time ago, because James and Cisco do them now, was that I always used to recommend that they would create class groups, and then add the class groups to a year group to make a new group, and then the year group to the key stage group, and so you build from small up to large that way, rather than. So I'm surprised that that's there. And when I wrote it, I'm just reporting what Google said. So maybe that was already there, but they're just adding all of them to show what types of groups you can now add, or restrict rather, so that you're able to restrict all of them. So you are theoretically, if what I've read is right, you can actually restrict that other groups can be added to it. So maybe that wasn't there. Maybe you could add groups before, but now you can also restrict other groups being added to a new group email. Maybe that's the change. I'll reread the thing and let you know that's the easiest thing to do with that one. Okay, but this is Education Plus, so these are the enterprise licenses that's not available on the fundamentals. Okay. So if you are a Google Meet hardware user, it seems to me that this would be a really useful tool. You basically get information about occupancy detection within the room where the Google Meet hardware sits. And the questions here, literally, I've just copied and pasted these straight from the blog post, because they're saying, well, these are the things that it allows you to do. If you're using Google Meet hardware as your video conferencing solution, you can actually start to interrogate that software, that hardware rather, and see whether actually it's being used properly, whether you need to purchase any more, whether you might need to think about breaking one very large room into two small rooms because it's getting very heavily overused, whether it's got high occupancy and all those kind of things. So it just allows you to interrogate the data to know whether you are making the most out of it and getting the best out of it, which is really, I think, very useful, because this isn't, it's not cheap software, video conferencing software generally, is it? So to know that you're making the most of it, I think is quite important. So that's what that one's about. This one, I think, if you are using Google Meet hardware, this is a really nice little piece of additional stuff that you can actually use. The screen that's attached to it as digital signage when it's not being used as a video conferencing solution. So it just seems really, really useful. And you can say, set it going this number of minutes after inactivity, and turn it off this number of minutes before the next meeting starts. So it interrogates the calendar connected to that Meet hardware solution and says, well, there's a meeting starting in 5 minutes, so I'll turn my signage off and just display the next meeting ready for the person when they arrive. So it's a really neat little tool. Again, only if you're using the Google Meet hardware. If you're not, then it doesn't apply to you, but it's a great additional piece of functionality. I think just allows you to give you another extra digital signage output within your organization, which is great. Excuse me. Okay, so this is about dynamic groups, that when you're making them, you can actually make them by custom user attributes rather than by OU, which is what has always been the case before. And here are some of the things that you could make them by. There's a massive, great big list of criteria. I just literally went and found some that I thought might be useful, because I'm thinking in multi-academy trusts, if you want to make some dynamic groups across, within a single subdomain, within a single school, within your map, for example, then you can do that by email type on email ending, or by the building they're in if you've assigned them to buildings. It does also depend on that data being in the directory. So if you've not filled out the field in the directory that tells you that that person is in that school, i.e. that building, then of course that criteria won't be usable because it's a blank field. So that it does point to more extensive use of the directory to make sure that it happens. But that's available, and that's as an open beta, so that's probably still in beta now, I didn't put the link in. I apologize for that. But when you get the slide deck, the blue heading is a link to the blog post, and the link will be there for you. But there's no sign up required anyway. I've just realized you don't need to sign up. You can just get on and do it. It's available already. Okay. So this, I think, is probably less useful for almost anyone on the call, because it applies to organizations with less than 100 active users. In the More button within the users section of the admin panel, you've got the option to go straight to recently deleted users. I suspect that there are very few schools in the country that have got less than 100 active users, so it probably doesn't apply. You can search for recently deleted users in the normal, by adding a filter in the normal way, which is how you would probably have to do it. But if you do happen to be in a very small school, then that option is in the More drop down to allow you to go straight to find recently deleted users. And I think it's 20 days, I think you've got, before you can't recover them.
Yes, exactly 20 days. 1 day over 20 and it's not recoverable.
All right, okay, thank you very much for that, James. So that's a meticulous one. That's an absolute. So just be aware of that if you have deleted someone that you didn't want to. But like I say, the drop down's only for less than 100 active users. For the rest of you, I'm sure you're familiar with a filter across the top of the users. You can filter there by recently deleted users. So you've got the option there should you want it. But 20 days. Thanks, James, for that. Okay, so I might need your help with this one as well, James. This is one of those classic so new enterprise certificate condition, and I think this is about company managed. Well, it is about company managed devices. So if you've got, mobile phones, tablets, and things that are managed by you within the admin panel, you can start to set some rules about how those get managed. But again, education standard, education plus, not in the fundamentals option. So that's that one. I think we're nearly there. There we are. Okay, so that's the last one. So the next update is on February the 1st. That's the next available Tuesday, and that will include all the ones from January. So were there any questions, or are there any questions?
Yeah, there is one actually that Louise posted earlier on. I've noticed that if I make a copy of a file that is a shortcut, the new file remains a shortcut. We used to be able to make a copy and then be the owner of that file. So one, do you understand that question, Paul? Now, Louise obviously is on the call, so if she needs to chip in with some extra details, that'll be fine.
So if I make a copy of that file shortcut, the new file remains a shortcut we've used to be able to make a copy and then be the owner of that file. Yeah, no, you can still make a copy. That's are you doing this with? Are you doing it within Drive? Aren't you?
Yes, yeah, I am.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So let me just share this tab instead. So if I go to make a copy,
That file's not a shortcut though, is it?
no.
No. So if you're making a copy of a file that is a shortcut.
Ah, right. You're making a copy of a shortcut. Ah, yes, because you're not making a copy of the original. That's why you're just making a copy of the shortcut. Sorry, I understand now. Yeah. Let me remove that. I don't need that. Sorry, I misread the question, Louise. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the rule that we've just talked about coming into place. Be a single file, and everything else will be a shortcut.
That's a bit. I mean, I can understand why they're doing it, but for when you've got, for example, you might have a shortcut that would be a template file, or so not exactly a template file, but something that you need to work on further that you want to change for another school, for example. It used to be really useful that you could just make a copy and then that would become yours and you can make all the changes without it obviously affecting the original file. But now you would need to make contact with that person to say, can I have the original file, to then make the copy? And do you know what I mean? So it becomes it's a lot more long-winded, I would say.
So if you've still got access to the original, then you can make a copy from the original.
No, but if you've not, if somebody shared a file with you, but it's that they've shared the shortcut, for example, or if you've got a shared area but they put a shortcut in as opposed to putting the original in, you can't really do anything with that file, can you?
No. Well, if all you've got access to is a shortcut to it, then yes, all you'll be able to do is do another shortcut.
Okay, thank you.
But if you've got access to the original, you should be able to make a copy of that, as long as they've allowed that, of course. Don't forget. Okay, excellent.
Surely, Paul, if you've got access to the shortcut, it means the shortcut takes you to the original URL of the document, and then from the document you can just make it.
Once it's open, yeah, that should work. Yeah, but within Drive, if you've on. So I'm just thinking, if someone shared a folder with you, and inside that folder there are shortcuts, within Drive, all you can do is right-click and make a copy of the shortcut. But if you open it and then go file, make a copy, that should allow you to, as long as you've got permission to make a copy.
Yeah, okay, great. I'll give that a try. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Dave just said, exactly the same that I've said. Yeah, so you can open the document, you're in the document because the shortcut takes you to the source. Yeah, and then you can do it from there, and that should be okay. And any other questions in here? Do you know that, Sammy? The other question from Louise is, how long do you have to be away from a device before it automatically changes your status?
Yeah, I answered that one. 15 minutes, but it pings it from your Gmail as well as your chat.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Yes, I've just seen it now. Excellent, good. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Thoughts, observations about any of the things that you've seen today? Doesn't have to be a question necessarily. Could use the hand raising option, couldn't we, to manage these? I'll stop sharing for the moment. One other thing I just want to talk about very quickly then, if that's okay, recording of Google Meet. I'm sure you've seen the notifications because there's been several coming through that for the fundamentals accounts, the recording option in Meet finished on Sunday. As with all these functionalities, it takes usually about 15 days for it to roll out across all the different domains. So you might still be able to record, but over the next sort of 15 days, that will eventually go away if you're on a fundamentals account. So just be aware of that. I would strongly recommend that you went into your admin panel and looked at what usage your users have been making of the recording functionality. And if it's substantial, then give yourself a breathing space, excuse me, and think about how you're going to proceed by getting yourself an enterprise trial, because that will give you the function to record for some of the accounts, because you get a limited number of accounts that you can trial it on. And it just gives you an extra couple of months to think about, well, so now we've lost that functionality. How do we now proceed? What's our next steps? What do we need to do? And it might be that an enterprise license is your best bet. There might be other solutions that you think about, but just gives you a breathing space should you need that. But that will go away. So if you're using it now, then you need to have a plan to allow your users to continue to record. If you don't have one yet, then you've got to spend some time working it out. Speak to Chris if you need a trial. He can sort that out for you. That's Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say that's perfect, Paul. It's 60 days for 50 users, so plenty of time once the trial's set up to work out your plan of attack moving forward, and we're more than happy to help out with that, as Paul's just stated. Yeah, no problem.
Is there anyone on the call who is on our fundamentals? And if you are, do you know what usage your staff are making of the recording functionality in Google Meet?
Just to be clear, fundamentals is the free version, isn't it, Paul? Yeah.
It is. Sorry. Yes. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah. Fundamentals is the free version from Google.
Just to say on that, we've already had schools contacting us this week who've just noticed that they can't record anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those strange ones because, to be fair to Google, they have sent out multiple communications about this, but I think sometimes it's about communication because not every IT admin in a given organization is necessarily aware of what features are specifically being used by the teaching staff, especially if it's a larger organization, like a large multi-academy trust or something like that. So I think that's what's caught a few people out, because we've certainly seen a bit of a reaction this week about the ability to retain recordings on Google Meet reverting to what it was, of course, previously, which was a subscription paid for service. It was never actually part of the free facility that Google provided. It was always a paid for subscription service, and all that's happened is it's reverted back to what it was before now, because Google made it available initially for I think it was either 6 or 12 months initially when the pandemic arrived in 2020, but then they also quite generously extended it for, I think they might have even extended it twice.
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah, I think so too. So for basically 2 years, they gave a paid for service for free. But it was always a paid for system previously. But as both Paul and Chris have said, you can have a free trial, no problem at all. Just reach out to Chris.
Robert, got your hand raised there.
Hi,
Robert. You okay, mate?
To double check. Is it the case that we need to be on enterprise pricing to retain recording functionality? Is that right?
Oh, I think you muted Paul.
Any recordings that you've done, you'll keep. But you won't be able to record from the moment that they turn it off onwards. So you'll need to be on an enterprise license.
Yeah, I was going to say, Robert, the subscription that you guys, you and Theo are on there, does allow you to retain recordings and use recordings moving forward. So, so you are okay from that perspective.
That's great. Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Thanks, mate.
Any other questions about anything else?
Just a quick question for you, Paul, here, and it's something I don't know. I know I probably should, but with the recordings, I'm assuming that if you've got Google Workspace Education Plus, but for whatever reason you've not assigned a paid license to me, I'll be classed as fundamental, so I won't be able to record, even though my domain is set up for recording. I would need an active license set to me, wouldn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a quick job to do. You can assign and unassign them quite quickly across from one user to another, but you've got to have a license, an enterprise license attached to that user before that user can record. So of course you wouldn't typically attach them to a student account, of course, but you would attach them to staff accounts. But it might be, office staff might not need ever to record. Teaching assistants might not ever need to record, although they might. You don't quite know. You've got to make a decision. So you've got to decide who has those licenses. Yeah, and without the license, they won't be able to record.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions about anything else at all? Not necessarily related to the updates that we've done. Anyone got any other questions? We've got James, one of our technicians, on the call. So if you've got a technical question, now is a chance to pose it.
Yep, I have a question, which is not related. Looking at this is a Google Classroom /admin type question in terms of the files that are being submitted by Google Drive. So if a student submits their file on Google Classroom, submits it in Google Classroom, they can then unsubmit whenever they want. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't always the case. I think in New Zealand, we put in Happy Teacher Dashboard maybe to work around this. But if a student's submitting an official assignment suggestion, maybe some sort of assessment that needs to be filed away by the teacher, is there a way the admin can close down the fact that they can unsubmit? Can that ownership of that file be given to the teacher? I think that's used to how it works, but it doesn't seem to work like that at the moment. Any feedback on that?
Yeah, the answer is that currently no. I know, Francis. I know it's insane. I used to work for a teacher training organisation that was accredited by a local university for PGCE students, and they wouldn't go to Google Classroom precisely for that reason. That through Moodle you can manage, a deadline and absolute. If there's exceptional circumstances where you want to give someone an extension, you can also do that, and that works fine. But at this moment in time, the students can unsubmit. So you've got to find an alternative way to manage those final submissions. I'm aware, Theo, you put your hand up next, but I think Sammy might want to talk about managing and submissions. Because you jump in first, Sammy?
Yeah, just to say that is true, that there's no way around that, but there are extras and add-ons that you can search for online. It's whether your admin would want to deploy those across the domain that do prohibit that.
Have you any information on those, Sammy?
Something called SafeDoc.
Yeah.
Not something I've tried and tested, but admins can disable the unsubmit and resubmit button using SafeDoc. I don't know anything other than that about it.
Okay, thank you. To tell me this, was this always the case, or has this changed?
I think it's always been the case.
Agree, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Francis, question mark. Yeah, every single Google app has got a question mark or a help menu in there. There's the option to send feedback.
Yeah.
Get your entire staff to send feedback, because unless we all complain about it, then it's not ever going to appear on the roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it quite unfunctionable. If we've got assessments coming in and they still belong to the student, it makes no sense, which means we need to work on another learning management system. Like, it's absolutely crazy. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Deb. I don't understand why it's not there yet and it's not on the roadmap yet, because I've submitted a number of times and I'm always encouraging people to do the same. So Theo. So thank you, Francis. Theo.
Sorry, I was on mute. Just hopefully a quick one. Does anyone know how to remove rooms from a calendar so they're not booked by users for meetings?
The rooms are made inside the admin panel. So if the rooms exist inside the admin panel, I presume if you remove them in the admin panel, they'll get removed. Their resources in the admin panel, says Jonas. So there we go. So I think you can, it's only the admin person that can remove them. So as long as they exist in the admin panel, everyone will be able to see those rooms.
Yes. So how do you, there don't seem to be a way of hiding those rooms without deleting them from the resources calendar, for example.
You want to keep the rooms, but just not them for them not to be seen.
Yeah, not visible to end users.
James, Dave, do you know the answer to that? Okay, no responses. That a bit beyond my technical capability. I know the basics, but not the fine detail of that. My understanding is that my expectation would be that the point is that they are there and they are bookable. But I would expect that you should be able to do it probably by OU, I guess, so that the students can't see them. I don't know. But I'd need to get James or Dave or someone to confirm that for me.
Yeah, thank you.
There we go. I will find an answer and then get back to you.
Thank you.
To do. Robert, you got a question?
No, I just wanted to follow up on that. I know from experience that with GAM, you can hide email addresses from the global address list. I wonder if calendar entries work in the same way.
You're on mute, Paul.
I'll do some further explanation and get back to you, Theo. That's the thing to do.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
I was just wondering, this is really directed at Chris on our team, but on the unsubmit challenge, Chris, I was just wondering if the Trelson assessment tool, formerly known as Chromex, I wondered if that would be a way of solving that issue in terms of once you've submitted via Chromex, because Francis indicated it was to do with, like, assessments, etc., and specifically, wanting to lock in when it's been submitted. But isn't that what Trelson now does?
Yeah, it might be worth just possibly me getting in touch with you. Yeah, certainly get in touch with you after the meeting, maybe, Francis. I've got your details, obviously. We've spoken a few times. So
please do. I really want a solution.
Yeah, Trelson, formerly known as Chromex, recently changed its name, is a piece of software that allows you to do secure exams from a Chrome device, or actually from a from the standard PC as well. But that could possibly be your answer. Yeah. Let me. Yeah.
I'm thinking it must be, and the reason I say that is
Yeah.
it's managed millions of exams in Gothenburg and all over Sweden and the Nordics, and
Absolutely.
it's been around for a while. And by definition, it meets the most stringent examination and assessment standards. So to do that, you wouldn't be able to have a student sort of unsubmitted or playing around with it once they've submitted. So I have a feeling we might have a solution for you, Francis, with an integration.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm happy to set up a quick meeting. We can even show you a demo of that. Takes no longer than about 20 minutes, something like that. So if it's something you'd like to learn a little bit more about, I can drop you a line afterwards. No problem at all.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that, Francis, because I think also from a teaching point of view, if I put a teaching head on, I think that application that we're talking about, how I would use it if I was a teacher again now, is I would be using it to improve the learning outcomes in terms of my students' assessments in informal examinations, because there's plenty of academic research out there that shows that if you are more experienced in that type of assessment of being in a formal online exam, when you come to do it for real, if you've been doing mock exams for a long time and you're familiar with the format and you don't feel anxiety and stress about it, then you perform better. I mean, it's an area we could talk about separately, because it's an area I've got a research interest in, actually, because, for example, if you want to improve the examination outcomes of your students, for every hour after 8 a.m. in the morning, their performance will drop by 1% in that exam. And so you can improve your exam outcomes in your school just by scheduling things earlier in the day. But I'd recommend having a look at that for sure.
Just a quick question from Jonas there in the chat, just saying about, are we still hosting these meetings on a daily basis? I believe so, Paul. I don't know what number you're up to now.
Well, I haven't counted them for a while, but yes, we are every day. Jonas, you're more than welcome to come in on exactly the same link as the one you used today.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a Techy Tuesday. Just a general virtual staff room. You can bring any questions or queries that you've got, and more often than not, there'll be somebody on the call who'll be able to help out with those.
Yeah. Dave, there was a question earlier about managing rooms in calendar events.
Okay, sorry, I had to nip off to take a phone call.
That's absolutely fine. I wonder whether you can actually make rooms resources, i.e. resources available to some people, not to others. So can you able to hide it for some people? Can you do it by OU?
Good question. The way we don't use rooms as rooms, if you like. We create. How do we do it now? We've created them not as rooms when we've done resource booking, because sometimes we don't want, because we don't have them accessible to students. So it's a long time since I've set this up, and I wouldn't be confident in giving you a legit answer on this one. I'd have to do some testing, I'm afraid.
Okay, not to worry. No, I'll find that out and get back to.
Sorry about that.
No, that's not a problem at all. Good. Any other questions from anyone? Excellent. Good. So as I said before, the next Techy Tuesday update is the 1st. My son's birthday, quarter of a century you'll be. Gosh, I know I don't look old enough, do I? You were all going to say that, weren't you? So thank you very much. We're only a few minutes early. I'm going to finish there. I'll hang around till the hour. If you want to stand by and ask me a question, by all means do. But if, other than that, then say thank you very much. And hopefully I'll see you before the 1st of February, but if not on the 1st. And I'm going to stop my recording now. Thanks very much for coming along, everyone.